first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with some introductions to our panelists. So I'm going to start with Rad. Radcliffe has been writing lesbian romances for 45 years and isn't planning to stop anytime soon. As long as there are stories to tell and readers who want to hear them, she'll keep writing. Her next release is Fearless Hearts, a standalone romance in the Adirondack Romance series to be released in July 2025. Other titles in this series are When Dreams Tremble and Only This Summer. All right. We also have Sam Liedl. She, her is the author of 8 novels. Originally from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Liedl now resides in Denver, Colorado. She works in education by day and writes sapphic history and fantastical stories in her free time. She enjoys watching women's sports, going on easy hikes, and staring at the Rocky Mountains in awe. Discovering Gold is her next historical romance, and it will be out in May 2025. All right. Shelley Thrasher, you want to give us a wave? Is a retired college English teacher who then became an editor at BSB 20 years ago. And she's published 5 romance novels with the company and has a book of poetry published elsewhere. She lives in East Texas in her hometown, to which she just moved from several larger Texas towns. She loves to travel, especially abroad, and has visited every continent except Antarctica. It is too cold there. Her pronouns are she, they, and she considers herself bi. She is currently writing a Nancy Drew type mystery with her partner, which is an enjoyable change for her. The novel is The Nursing Home Hoax, and it is due out in July.
Great title.
That partner, Anne, if you want to give us a wave, is a first-time novelist, a retired community college teacher, and a grateful member of the East Texas community. She, he, they are pronouns and met Shelley when she returned from her COVID-infected trip to Bali, and together they decided to write a cozy mystery. The experience of co-authoring has been a thrilling discovery, bringing the joy of collaboration and the nostalgia of Nancy Drew's empowering adventures to life through the perspectives of octogenarian characters.
That's us.
Lastly, we have Elena Abbott is a trans woman from Edmonton, Alberta, up in Canada. She uses she, her pronouns. She deals mostly in lesbian and sapphic smut, whether in paranormal romances or sci-fi or even contemporary settings. She likes talking trans and cis characters alike, taking trans and cis characters alike and smashing them together like Barbie dolls while making kissy noises. Her next book is an erotic lesbian romance titled To Please Her and will be available May 13th. And just a last bit, I'm your moderator. I'm Jennifer Carter, she, her. I live in Minnesota where I juggle working, dreaming of starting my own profit, playing board games, and exploring the world with my 3-year-old and 1-year-old. I've been an avid dungeon master for years, though only ever of Dungeons and Dragons, and I have a growing collection of female action figures. I write world-building fantasy novels about powerful women falling in love with each other, of course. All right, so those are your panelists, and what I'd like to do, you heard their title, you heard when it's coming out, but we don't know anything about it. So I'd like each of you, I'm going to hand it around the circle to tell me what is your elevator pitch? If you had to describe your upcoming book I'm going to limit you to 1 sentence to hook a new reader, what would you say? Ellen, I'm handing it to you first.
What would I say? I would say hot and kinky lesbian sex.
Love it.
That would just
Got me hooked.
That's very much what the book is about.
Thank you. Shelley, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, my sentence is a little bit longer. Nancy Drew rides again, though she's in her early 80s, queer, named Taylor, and is out to champion senior citizens. She is out to champion senior citizens, especially those who can't help themselves.
I love that. Thank you. Sam.
So my pitch would be a single mother and a rowdy cowgirl find romance in a small Colorado mining town during the 1920s.
Nice. Thank you. And Rad, that leaves you.
Okay, mine is a first responder romance that features a DEC ranger and a displaced fishing boat captain who shows up new in town to work with the local sheriff's department. Adventure ensues.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. I'm getting more and more excited about each of these. I'm going to shift now to characters, right? To me, at least, characters really they make the book. Whether I, love the characters or I hate them, that's what drives whether I want to keep reading. So I want to know who are your compelling characters? And I'd love to know, when I read your book, what character am I going to fall in love with? What character are your readers going to fall in love with and why? I'm going to start this time with Sam.
All right. Well, obviously, I hope readers fall in love with my protagonists, Eleanor Perry and Julia Holt. But outside of them, I find secondary characters end up being some of my favorites when the story is said and done. So if I can cheat, I'm going to say two characters. One of them being Rose Holt, who is Julia's sister. She's the older sibling, very kind of endearing no nonsense type of character, and she's often the sounding board for her um, at times wild younger sibling who needs to be reined in a little bit here and there. And there was also an amusing minor plot line with Rose, who she is a terrible, terrible cook. And so that was kind of fun to put in moments of levity throughout the story with those bits. And then the other character is Eleanor Perry's best friend. Her name is Sue. She is the mill manager's wife in the town. She's a progressive go-getter. She's on every council that exists in that small town. And she's also a terrible gossip. So I really loved writing her, even though the other characters at times just wanted to shut her up and keep her from spilling everybody's secrets. But she was very fun to write.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Rad, I'll pass it over to you. What character do you want readers to fall in love with?
One of them at least. I think that readers generally will gravitate in a lesbian romance to one or the other character. And so I'm okay, regardless of which one they fall in love with. I think that um, they're very different characters. Nat Evans is a character who was first introduced in When Dreams Tremble, which I published, I think, in 2005, maybe 2006. And I always wanted to tell her story, and now I'm getting around to it. She's been a secondary character in the previous book, which was only this summer. So she kind of came back onto the scene. She's in her middle to late 40s. She has spent her life taking care of others. She's a DEC ranger, so she takes care of the wilderness. She takes care of the people who enjoy the wilderness, who get hurt in the wilderness or lost out there. And she's pretty much eschewed anything personal. So she's a kind of reserved and guarded character, and the kind of character I like to write who comes alive in a romance. The other main character is Victory O'Brien, and she is 28. She has moved to upstate New York from Maine after the death of her father. She's displaced, she's wounded, she's not sure what she's going to do with her life, but one thing that she loves is water. She was a fishing boat captain with her dad, and now she captains a water patrol unit um, craft on Lake George as part of the sheriff's department. So they are the two main characters, and I think that it's an age gap romance as well as a first responder. So I think that depending on which kind of character and personality you gravitate towards, one or the other hopefully will um, ring a bell.
Yeah. Thank you. I love those characters already. Elena, over to you.
Um, I think, and I hope, honestly, that my readers fall in love with all my characters, personally, but especially Sabrina, the main character in the story. and to please her, because honestly, she could use some love. She's been kind of kicked around, chewed up, spit out, and pushed down by a society that doesn't really approve of who she is as a trans woman. But despite all that, she's still going. She's still trying to achieve her goals, trying to live her life. And I think a lot of people, especially trans people right now, need to see a character not just surviving, but trying to thrive despite everything that's happening
And be happy.
and be very happy.
Love that. Yes, I agree with you absolutely. And Anne, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, I am new to this game, so I'm not exactly sure who might fall in love with whom, but the character that I love the most is named Edith, Dr. Edith, who is an East Texas woman who spent her career practicing medicine in Ghana, in Africa, and she's been injured and has come home for rehabilitation. I find her a woman of great heart and tremendous understanding, and I love her, and I hope others will too.
Nice.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So, without spoilers, which is obviously the hard part of this question, I'd love to know if there's a particular scene in your book that you're especially excited for readers to experience. Since, presumably no one but your beta readers and you have experienced so many of these scenes, what are you excited for people to experience? Rad, I'll start with you.
Um, that is a tough one because I think that I bet everybody's going to say the same thing. There's a lot of scenes that are really special. There's a lot of adventure scenes in this book because that really, is kind of like what this series of books is all about. So I have a lot of exciting things that happen in the mountains, but I have one particular scene which is based on a real life event, um, which I read about and which actually moved me a great deal, and I wanted to include it in my book. And I don't think it'll actually spoil anything because just to know what the beginning of the scene is, it's a rescue of a downed plane in the Adirondacks, which was carrying puppies from a shelter in the South to shelters up here. It was High Kill shelters in the South. And the pilot was ferrying them here. Literally, this is true, and crashed. And it's about the rescue of the pilot and the puppies.
That feels like a very powerful scene already, just
It
hearing
was.
about
It
it.
was hard to write. It was tough. It was difficult to choreograph. Trying to describe what everybody saw and how they got up there. And, it's, of course, it's in a unreachable part of the mountains, which was absolutely true. I mean, the Adirondacks, it's, like 8,000 acres of primal land. And, it's very hard to get up there, which makes it a great setting.
Definitely. Definitely. All right, Elena, what's a scene you're excited for people to experience?
All of the kinky sex scenes.
Of
They,
course.
they were a lot of fun to write, I have to admit. But honestly, I'm very proud of all the scenes in the book. I can't wait to hear what people think about them. But there is two particular scenes. One in the first act of the book that I really can't wait to see what happens, like what people think about it. And then there's the second one. I can't give away any spoilers in the middle of the second act where things just get really really emotional for me writing it, and I want to see how people react to those.
Yeah, that's so true. I can say for myself as well, it sounded like Rad, it was true for you that some of these scenes are just for you as an author, so emotional and so powerful to write and to get onto the page out of your brain and out of your heart. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Sam, over to you.
Well, I think plot-wise, I'm excited for readers to experience the opening sequence of my book, the prologue. Much like my last novel, another historical romance adrift, the prologue really sets the tone for the rest of the story. And my hope is that that particular scene introduces one of the characters, Eleanor Perry, really well, and also leaves the readers wondering what might have happened to lead up to that particular sequence of events, and where she's going to go from there. It's kind of a harrowing experience, not as harrowing as a plane rescue with down and with puppies, but it's a fairly intense opening scene emotionally for that character. So I'll be interested to hear what people think about it. But then romance wise, there's a scene that takes place during a summer church social in this small town where these characters live. And that was fun to write when it came to the romantic side of things, to continue building that tension between the characters. You know, it's a warm summer day, there's good food, good drink, there's a kind of a lighthearted nature to everything that's happening then. And with the story being set where it is in a mining and milling town, you know, the day-to-day lives of these characters are not necessarily easy. So this scene, this social that everybody goes to, is a chance for everyone to just kind of relax and enjoy themselves. Everybody's walls kind of come down a little bit, and it made for a lovely backdrop to continue developing the romance between Julia and Eleanor.
Yeah, I love those scenes where you can kind of slow it down and look, bring your characters together in a different way.
Hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I think lastly I have Shelley.
The scene that really pleased me, pleasantly surprised me when we first started writing the book, occurred near the opening, and it's a scene, just a kind of a common day scene of the two main characters, Meryl Lee and Taylor, are driving down the street, and they're going in front of a junior high school, just common stuff. And Taylor drives a Carmen Ghia. Meryl Lee drives an old van. And so at that point, when we got to this scene, and I started reading what Anne wrote that scene, and I laughed out loud. I couldn't believe it was so funny. I've never written anything funny. And so that was just a taste, because what was happening was Meryl Lee was jabbing at Taylor, because Taylor was so but no, it was the opposite. Taylor was jabbing at Meryl Lee because she was so pokey. And they were back and forth with humorous dialogue. And I thought, wow, I've teamed up with somebody who can really write humor. So we've got a nice combination going of Nancy Drew mystery and the humor that you see in the interaction between these two main characters. So that was I think that the readers will enjoy the humor in this book a lot. And especially, Nancy Drew, I don't know if you young people have read Nancy Drew, but growing up, she was everybody's hero. If you were a woman, you wanted to be like a girl, you wanted to be like Nancy Drew. So we've got 80-year-old Nancy Drews, and we still want to be
And her
the same.
best friend's name was George. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And the main character Taylor is gay, so
I love that. And you're right, humor brings so much to the novel. Sam, you were mentioning that with one of your favorite characters, really like bringing that levity that, makes it a very well-rounded novel. I love that. And we've had Morgan join us, so I'm going to give you, Morgan, a bit of an intro, read your bio, and then we'll pass it to you for this question, which is on the scene that you are particularly excited for readers to experience. So this is Morgan Adams, who lives in Boston, Massachusetts, with her wife and their 3 rescue children, the furry kind. Morgan enjoys being active and outside whenever possible. When it's cold, she likes to spend time at museums or snowboard. She works full-time as an attorney, and is also in graduate school for history. View from the Top is her debut novel, and her second novel, A Conflict of Interest, will be released in June. And actually, Morgan, I'm going to change what I just said I was going to ask you, because I want your elevator pitch. I want to know what your book
Oh
is
boy.
about. So I'm going to start there. Please give us your elevator pitch.
And I have the other one ready. So the elevator pitch is an attorney meets a beautiful redhead woman, I'm throwing that in because I'm reading the chat, at a bar, and there's instant chemistry. They spend a great night together. And the attorney is incredibly shocked when she goes to her deposition the following Monday and learns that the woman that she just slept with is actually a witness in one of the cases that she is working on.
Whoops.
So, yeah, whoops. That's actually that's the subtext. Whoops. So yeah, that's pretty much why I called it a conflict of interest for obvious reasons. But it's a fun read. I'm excited about this one.
Yes, that sounds wonderful. And you want to tell us about that scene because you were ready for that question.
Sure. Yeah, so obviously, now knowing the elevator pitch, there's definitely a lot of should we, shouldn't we, kind of like tension, obvious chemistry back and forth. So they spend definitely some time throughout the book kind of dancing around each other. Circumstances continue to like pull them together, and then at a certain point, I mean, I don't think it's so much of a spoiler that like it's gonna have a happy ending, like obviously, but um, there is a specific award dinner that they end up going to unknowingly. The attorney goes because her firm's like is sponsoring this event basically, and the witness is actually a doctor who's been given an award. So they end up kind of like bumping into each other. Um, and I really enjoyed writing the scene because it's definitely like a fun scene to kind of like navigate them like kind of orbiting each other throughout this like very fancy event. It's actually based on an event that they have in New York at the LGBTQ plus center. So I got to like research the actual event and then pretend to go to it for a night, which was fun. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like playfulness in that scene, and I think you get to see them kind of like frustrated that like they don't think this is going to work, even though they really want it to. So yeah, try not to give spoilers, but it's a fun scene. I mean, it's all fun, but I like that scene a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Well, I'm going to move to our next question then, which is about writing challenges. So, right, every book comes with its own struggles. Was there a particular challenge in writing this one that pushed you as an author?
Mm.
I'm going to start by handing it actually to Shelley, especially because I know this was your first time writing it together. So let me know.
First time writing together, first time writing a mystery. And I thought, see, do a mystery, that'll be a piece of cake. That's just, simple little kid stuff. And we can make it relevant to older people and all women, particularly. But one thing that I had a problem with was I'd never written a mystery, and I'd written 5 romances. So I kept trying to put romance in the mystery. And when we got the edits back, that was not good news because, I had not been serious about my mystery writing. So that was the biggest challenge for me, was truly to learn to write a mystery. And it's a cozy mystery, but everything has to be logical, and I'm not logical, and it has to be tied up. And so I was really glad I've got a partner that can write mysteries and has the humor too. So I got it made. It's going to be a good book, I think.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, Elena, I'll hand it to you next. What was your challenge?
I had a couple of particular challenges writing this one. The first was probably like many authors. I had a perceived inability to write a good sex scene. This novel was very much about the characters coming together through sex. And while I'm told I write pretty good ones, my brain likes to argue against the people who tell me that. So it took some time and a lot of words of encouragement from some very good friends to get past that and write what I know and love about sex and kink. The second was worrying about writing a real dynamic transgender character, not someone who could be seen as static or unchanging or even a mockery of the trans experience, which was something I was really afraid of. I based a lot of Sabrina's transition on my own experience, as I have in the past with other trans characters. but I always worry that because someone else's experience might differ from mine, it will affect how they see the character in a negative way. It was a struggle to try to ensure that Sabrina was as real as I could possibly make her.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you had those people to encourage you to keep writing. Means that we get to enjoy it and to experience your character's experience. So thank you for that. Sam, I'll hand it to you. What was your writing challenge?
So, for this particular book, the internal conflicts between my characters was something I really had to develop more as I was working through this draft. And this was something that my editor was really great at pointing out that I had thrown a lot of external conflict onto these characters. But the relationship was lacking a bit when it came to the conflict of the things they needed to overcome to be ready for one another in this romance. With romances, there's often, the miscommunication moments, the misunderstanding, and I found I was resolving those far too quickly, or wasn't making them as big as they needed to be. And essentially the doubt wasn't there enough with the characters. The questions of what if I fail at this, or what if they see me for who I believe I am, with the characters, bringing their baggage and their insecurities from their backstories to the table. I needed to flesh that out a lot more. And something I've noticed about my books is guilt is an emotion I really often have my characters grapple with, and usually due to something that happened in their past. So I really had to make sure that both Julia and Eleanor were working through their relationship with their guilt completely, so that they were both ready and capable of being the women that each of them deserved for one another, and making sure that they reached the point where they accepted themselves for who they were, and were ready to be loved, and offer love in return. So I had that there, but it wasn't nearly developed enough. So that was something that my editor challenged me with, and I like to think I grew and was better for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. It's oftentimes we try, and I've seen this in books, I've experienced it myself, we try to rush through that.
Mhm.
And they got there. But if we don't really slow down, you don't experience it. I love that. Thank you, Sam.
Mhm.
Morgan, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah,
What
that's
was your
funny,
writing?
Sam. I struggle with that as well. It's like we all want the happy ending, right? So you're just like, oh, and they worked it out, like it's fine. Um, I would say that was certainly a struggle that I experienced as well. And so in my first book, my characters were coworkers. So there was, the natural force proximity. Um, and one of the things that I was learning through reviews, which I unfortunately read and take to heart, um,
Oh.
well, yeah, I know it's painful sometimes. Was like I kind of did, I guess, what Sam said, right? Like I moved a little too fast. So this time I really wanted to focus on like character development. I wanted you to feel like you were learning who both of these people were before learning them as a couple. And while there are like elements that bring them together, there's not that forced proximity of like being in an office, 5 days a week. So one of the challenges that I had, and that my actually really wonderful editor helped me work through, was giving readers the interaction between the characters while you're still like learning them. There was
Mhm.
too much of like just them living their lives separately, which, me as an author, I'm like, but I love these characters. Like they're my babies, right? But like readers don't care, right? They want to see the dynamic, they want to see the characters interact. And so we took some scenes that originally were, for example, like texting, and we turned them into phone calls and like, made more of that kind of presence in each other's lives earlier in the book, rather than kind of like an unintentional slow burn that I was not realizing I was writing. Because a slow burn is great, but like it's got to be like just the right kind of slow burn. So yeah, I would say like creating the proximity was definitely more of a struggle in this book for sure, and trying not to make it too happy. Make the conflict like an actual conflict.
Yes. Thank goodness for great editors who say,
Yeah,
actually,
for sure.
you
Yeah, she's
should,
wonderful.
whatever it is. Yes, totally. All right, Rad, over to you.
I think the challenge for me in this one, and usually I'm not particularly challenged. I mean, I pretty much always know where I'm going and I live and die by structure.
Hmm.
So, for me, I know exactly what needs to be in the first 25%, and I know where I need to be at the 50% mark. And I know all of those things as I'm writing. With this, I was challenged by balancing the pacing and the balance between the action scenes and the romance scenes, and how, in a first responder romance or in an action-based romance, the action scenes need to progress the romance. So they can't exist all by themselves. I mean, they're great to write and it's really fun, but the purpose of them needs to be to show the characters something about each other that advances their connection or their emotional appreciation of one another. So balancing those scenes, because action scenes are easy to write. I mean, they're always fun. There's, you have a forest fire, you have a downed plane, whatever it is that your first responders do, those scenes are easy. But then you have to connect those to the interpersonal relationship. And that, I think, was more of a challenge in this book, mostly because I had a lot of trouble keeping them out of bed. I really, that, one of the characters is young and needs connection because she just lost everything in her life, which makes her vulnerable. But she is more adventurous. She's braver. She's younger. The older you get, the more cautious you become, which I think in an age gap romance, it's usually the older character that puts the brakes on, which is true here. So I really had to slow down that part of the romance arc. And as I've gone through the second draft, I've really kind of dialed back just a little bit the early um, attraction. It's there and it always needs to be there. I mean, in a romance, you always generally start with an attraction, but I really needed to kind of like modulate that a little bit because of the circumstances to be able to show the characters progress from where they are at the beginning and what is creating the conflict between them. So there was a little bit of a pacing issue that I don't usually have, but I like to get my characters into bed. When I first started writing, I always wrote a lot of sex early in the book. And I don't as much anymore. I do a lot more character development and a lot more emphasis on the emotional connection. But these two, it was, trying to hold off till the 50% mark was hard.
Yes. Yeah, I think that sometimes as a reader, we feel that too of like, just jump in bed, just jump in bed.
Right.
But we've got some work to do. I love that. For my next question, actually, Rad, I'm going to hand it to you first again because it's a question about setting.
Mm.
So, right, whether your book is contemporary, historical, speculative, setting plays a huge role. And you've already talked a little bit about how the Adirondacks are so unique and they have important elements that turn the story that direct the plot. And so I'd love to hear more about, what about your world, your setting, your situation about your book really drove your writing or your plot or your characters, any of the elements.
Yeah, I mean, of all the books I've written, the series in particular tend to be very heavy on setting. The Provincetown Tales, I started writing that book. The first book I wrote, Safe Harbor, which is the first one that was published, I wrote it because it was about Provincetown, because it was about a community. And I think that for me, for my series in particular, both the Provincetown Tales and the Rivers Community series, which is set right here where I live, the setting creates the ambiance for all of the stories and enables you to write more stories in a series because the setting ties the characters together. The thing about the Adirondacks, which is why I enjoy writing this so much, is that I live here and I grew up here. Um, it I don't know how much home impacts what we write about. But When Dreams Tremble was one of the first books I wrote. It was probably maybe the 10th, I guess. And it's set in Lake George. And Only This Summer is also set in Lake George, as is this one. When I was 3, my brother was 13, and he was gone all one Saturday. And he came home because he had hitchhiked up to Lake George and got a job for the summer. And he lived and worked up there. That was a long time ago. You could do that when you were 13. I lived up there the summer between my senior year of high school and my first year of college. So it's a very personal setting, and I know it intimately. So it was really fun to be able to set my books there where I grew up and where I lived and where I camped with my parents. And it ties the stories together. The love of the characters for the land, it really ties all of the characters in each book together. And it gives me a super setting where I can do almost anything with adventure, with plot points that bring my characters together because in the various books, there's a forest ranger, this particular character, Victory O'Brien, is a water patrol cop. I mean, the lake is patrolled by the sheriff's department with boats, and she's a pilot on one of those boats. So the setting is critical to this particular series, and it's one of the things I enjoy most about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love that. And you're right. In a series, the setting starts to be, if that's what ties your characters together, it becomes so much more important.
Yeah.
Sam, I'll pass it to you. Hearing your elevator pitch and your bio of Texas and Colorado, would love to hear how your experiences impacted the setting and how the setting impacted the characters.
Sure. Yeah, I actually I like how you phrase that because that's kind of how the characters developed for this story. I have a woman, Julia, who's the cowgirl from West Texas, which is where I went to college. And we have Eleanor, who's not originally from Colorado, but she's lived there for quite some time by the time the story begins. So, slightly different worlds these two are coming from. Julie is also from a well-to-do oil family, so she's a tad spoiled. And she is unaccustomed to kind of the rougher mountain life that she decides to embark on, which is what brings her to Idaho Springs, where this story is set, which is a real town. It's about an hour from Denver. And like all of my historical novels, I, put my own twist on them a little bit. But I use a lot of the history and the actual, places, streets, and people who were residing there as inspiration. And I dragged my lovely fiance out there a lot with me on research trips to go to Idaho Springs just to really dive into it. And she was probably sick of going on all the mine tours that we went on, but we went on quite a few just to learn a lot about it. And I heard so many stories going out there each time. And one story in particular that struck me was hearing about the laundresses that worked for the mill there and how they when they were cleaning the uniforms of the men who were pulling the gold out of the rock, some of the gold would jump onto the uniform, and the laundresses would find it when they were cleaning. And I thought, oh, what an interesting, potentially kind of moral dilemma you have there of what do you do when you find that? And so that ends up being a bit of a subplot for Eleanor, who is a laundress who works for the mill. And so there was, the setting it was just so fun. It was such a fun playground of history. There's the mill that some of the characters work at. It's called Monarch Mill in the story, but it's actually based on Argo Mill, which is not a functional mill today, but it does still exist. It's a museum. So, a lot of, again, inspiration from real places. And it's just a really rich, well-preserved historical town that was
Yeah.
really fun to bring to the page.
Yeah. But an important question, how many times did you go to Bojo's, which is a famous pizza place that originated in Idaho Springs?
Enough to put them in my acknowledgments for thanking them for feeding me.
I love that. That's so great.
Mhm.
Elena, I'll pass it to you to tell us about setting.
Um, I have troubles with setting quite often. And this being the first contemporary romance that I wrote, um, I didn't actually know what city I was completely setting it in, like if it was going to be fictional or if it was going to be a real city, until I was about halfway done the book. But then I did decide, you know what, I will write what I know. So I set it in Edmonton, in my home city. I was born and raised here. I know the area and the businesses and the geography very, very well. And I wanted to celebrate some of the more unique aspects of some of the smaller independent bookshops, as well as a particularly nice adult toy store that I've been to on a number of occasions with my wife, which are very important settings for the characters. And while the shops and the businesses in the story are fictional, they are all based on real places in my world and places I've been to and know a lot about.
Wonderful. All right. I'm going to hand it now to Anne. Would love to hear, I think it sounds like setting is a key aspect of your novel as well.
It is, and the novel is largely set in a nursing home, which people think of as kind of a grim place, I'm afraid. And we've discovered some very nice things about nursing homes, and those in East Texas are especially nice and surprise a lot of people to discover. So finding the locales was not difficult because we Shelley and I both live in East Texas, but looking at them in new ways was the challenge for us, and for me, a great pleasure.
Cool. Beautiful. All right. And Morgan, over to you.
Um, my editor told me that my book has three characters. The two protagonists and New York City is the third. Um, because I really enjoy writing about New York. New York is where I lived when I say that New York saved me, honestly. When I first moved there, I was just like not really sure of who I was. I had grown up in a pretty strict religious upbringing. I was escaping a super abusive relationship. And I moved to New York completely alone. I didn't know anybody. I rented a U-Haul and I drove around and picked up free furniture on the side of the road. And it really it saved me, and it also just gave me wings and it gave me my voice. And so I feel like when I'm writing these books that are set in New York, I'm kind of thanking it, I guess, in a way. And I'm also hoping to give the readers a glimpse into this really special, unique place that now I can let my characters kind of like live through all of these adventures that I've been to and go to these really wonderful creative spaces that I was so blessed to get to enjoy. I mean, Boston is great, don't get me wrong, but I moved here for my wife. So New York is really just a special place, and it's just a really like open arms kind of feel for the community, and it's a really strong community. So I definitely think that it's obviously central. I am branching away from New York in my next book, but it's actually quite sad. Sam, maybe I'll call you because it's in Texas and I know really nothing about Texas. So I'm trying to like push myself, but also it's like I guess it's Elena, it's similar to what you said. You write what you know, right? So like that was what I felt comfortable with. That was my home for so long and was kind of like my little whoopee, my safe space. And it was really like so much fun to get to recreate those memories in even like kind of better ways because I could turn like what was a crappy date into like a really successful date for my characters because it's not the space's fault that she was rude, right? Like you can just like recycle, like reframe your memory. So yeah, New York, for these two books, I can't really imagine. And just like the characters kind of, there's something about New Yorkers, like they just got an edge, just a total like F you, nothing's gonna phase them. Like the things that I saw and smelled on my way to work. Like there's nothing like it. So yeah, it's got to be New York for these two books for sure.
I love that. Thank you. All right, I have one question from the audience, and then we'll have time for a lightning round, and then we'll close us out. So our one question is specifically for Rad. When choreographing such a big scene, I assume we're talking about the puppies and the plane crash. Where do you even start?
I think you start in the middle of the action as much as you can. I think most action scenes don't need an introduction, especially if you're doing a first responder kind of scene. You really want to drop the characters into it, so you start with an emergency call. So that's, they're at breakfast and boom, and because they're first responders, that's often how it works. You're going about your life, or if you're an ER doc, you're in the ER drinking a cup of coffee, and boom, the doors open and in rolls a patient. So your action scene starts almost instantaneously, taking the characters from their everyday life, boom, and putting them into the middle of a crisis. So in my book, in that scene, they get a call. There's a down plane in the mountains, all hands on deck. Everybody gets up. They all happen to be in a bar. It's after work, and they're all sitting in there. And boom, everybody's up and everybody's out. So I think that for most scenes, like emergency room scenes, hospital scenes, first responder scenes, you want to get immediately into the action and throw your characters, just as you would in real life, right into the scene.
Thank you. That's really good advice and makes it exciting to read those scenes.
Yeah.
I do think we probably have time for a quick answer on another question that's come into the chat for Anne and Shelley. What was the greatest challenge in writing as a team? You can give us the short version, because I'm sure you could probably talk for longer.
Well, for me, there was no challenge. It was just heaven to have somebody else who knew what the rules were and could work through the problems. And we've had so much fun reading the chapters to each other as a form of editing. And that really has been a delight. So as a newbie, I would recommend that everybody have as their co-author Shelley Thrasher. That's the answer.
I love that.
And I really enjoyed, after writing 5 books by myself, it was wonderful to have company, especially with, Anne we're just so compatible. And like she said, we just had a wonderful time. We laughed. We've never gotten mad at each other. We just worked things out. And I think it's going to make a really fun book for people to read, because we had so much fun. Some of it's bound to spill over.
I love that. All right, lightning round for everyone. Kind of an out of left field question for you on your book that's coming out. If your book had to be paired with a song, food, or drink that captures its vibe, what would you choose? Elena, I'll start with you.
If I were to pair it with anything, it would definitely be a song. And honestly, I've thought about this before. I have different songs in mind for each character. But since the story follows Sabrina, I'd go with hers, which is a song called I Don't Know How to Talk to Girls by Beth McCarthy, which just basically sums up her experience in romance and everything.
I love that. Awesome. Anne, over to you.
Well, this is a cozy, comedic mystery. And so I think hot chocolate is the drink that I associated with it.
Nice. Good answer. Sam, to you.
I would I'd pair Discovering Gold with a hot toddy and gingerbread cookies, something warm and cozy on a cold Colorado night.
Good answer. Rad.
Bloody Mary, hot and spicy.
Ooh, very nice. Morgan.
It's going to be a strawberry margarita.
Ooh,
A
awesome.
little sweet, a little dangerous, and hopefully makes you feel good afterwards.
And I want to answer too.
Yes.
You Are My Sunshine. And it's sweet and happy and old-fashioned and timeless.
That is a great
song.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for all of your answers, for telling us about these exciting books. If you look into the chat, you'll see more information on all of these books, links on where to find them. So if you were like, ooh, that one, that's my next read, go find them in the chat so you can buy them and have them first thing when they are published. I want to thank all of my panelists for being with us and sharing your information and your brains, your time, your effort, and your stories. And I also want to thank all of our audience participants in this session and all of our sessions for this weekend. It's been wonderful to spend time with you and to share our books with our readers. We love you all. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for
Bye.
being here.